you for joining us at the 2:05 hour, an hour away from magic 3:05 time, which we hope to be off by then. I want to thank you for joining us for this session focused on international development and international development in Latin America. I think you'll get a nice perspective from three of our special guests, and two in particular are proud FIU alumni. Today we're joined by Kirill Resnick and David Bendana. Both play important roles within the U.S. Agency for International Development. As we mentioned earlier, and hopefully you had a few minutes to watch that video by Acting Administrator John Barza. The agency is now being led by one of our own, which is kind of fun, and also someone that's been very active with FIU in Washington, D.C. So I want to quickly just get to it and have both of these gentlemen introduce themselves and give a perspective of both the role they play within USAID, but also how they ended up where they're at now. So we'll start with Kirill Reznik. Kirill, welcome to the group.
Thanks, Carlos, and thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. Just very, very quickly so we can get to the substance of it. My name is Kirill Reznik. I graduated from FIU in 1995, and for almost the entire time since then, I have in one way or another, so now over 25 years, have been working with USAID in, like I said, one capacity or another, primarily as a contractor. And I have worked for probably 10 at this point, USAID implementing partners, both nonprofit and for-profit. At the moment, I am the senior program manager for a large support services contract, institutional support contract embedded with the USAID client for the Office of Food for Peace in the DACHA Bureau, which is Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance, which, depending on who you ask, may or may not exist anymore. We're going through a restructuring, and we are now going to be part of the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. The Office of Food for Peace is going to cease to exist shortly and be reorganized under BHA. So I have worked across the globe in a variety of different implementing sectors, whether it's economic development, democratic institution support, agriculture, humanitarian assistance, etc. The one place that I frankly am weakest on is Latin America. So for full disclosure, I was a last minute substitute for this. But so I'm going to leave the Latin America discussion to David, and more happy to talk about USAID in general terms, how they do work around the world and how implementing partners are particularly involved in that process. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to David.
And Kirill, actually, a few words on how you ended up pursuing this career and where you're at today.
I ended up pursuing this career. I give a full 100% credit to FIU, actually. I was one day pulled into the career services offices at the Biscayne Bay campus, North Miami campus, however we call it now. And because I spent a lot of time next door at the student government, student council's office, and was told in no uncertain terms by the career services person there, who was a friend, that I need some real experience in my major, because all the stuff I do on campus is fantastic, but that's never going to get me hired anywhere. And she told me that the next day there is going to be USAID recruiters recruiting for an internship at the Medique campus, which was then called South Campus, and that there was only one slot available at 7 a.m. and she has signed me up, and I better be there. And so I said, yes, thank you. Ran immediately to find a available professor in international relations, found the only one that was still there after 5 o'clock, and said, Professor, can you tell me something? And she says, what? And I said, what's USAID? So she gave me a quick 5-minute primer. I went to the interview. I got the internship. I came to Washington, D.C. for a summer, and then came back to Washington, D.C. after graduation to pursue a master's degree, and immediately got a job with the very office that I had interned with the year before. And haven't left since. So clearly there's something there.
There you go. All right. David Bendana.
Hey, how you doing? This is David Bendana. I am an FIU, a very proud FIU alumni. I got my bachelor's in anthropology in 1997, and it was my years in FIU were a great it was a great opportunity to be able to be in a campus that provided the environment for learning, for questioning, and I did my bachelor's in anthropology, but I did a minor with international affairs. And the reason why is because I could see the nexus of having these social issues and how you can look them both individually, you can look at them community-wise, you can also look at them at an international level. And I had that interest for that international perspective, which is actually also a result of being in Miami. In Miami, you're basically more connected to the rest of Latin America than to the United States. So you have this vibe that you get to live in. And after that, in 1997, I was able to when I graduated from FIU, I was able to get a scholarship. It's a really good program. It's called Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, which is basically a program that allows folks who are in school, who are just graduated from school, to do internship with the federal government, and that's how I came to DC. It was an incredible opportunity being able to have with a group. They have my classes, and we had a group of our class of HACU interns from all across the country. And that in itself, being here, seeing that here in Washington D.C. is the nexus of this of all this activity relating to international organizations. You have the federal government, so I basically arrived to where I wanted to be, and I realized quickly that if I wanted to go ahead and pursue a career, I needed to both work, but at the same time also further my education. And I got a master's in international development at George Washington University. And that was great because you are in the city, you're able to both take classes and actually be able to step out of your class and then do an internship at the Inter-American Development Bank, or be able to go to an incredibly interesting presentation at CSIS. Here in DC, you do have, in a very reduced space, you have a number of international, you have NGOs, you have so many organizations that are working in the same area if you work in international development or international affairs. And so then I got my master's in 1999, and my first job was with Catholic Relief Services, very interesting being to work in Latin America. And then I joined the State Department. I had the opportunity to work with the State Department around 6 or 7 years, or was it 8? Time flies. But I was able to work with them, in a number of capacities, including as a program, a foreign service officer, civil service always, but working for the Office of Cuban Affairs. And after 8 years, I moved from what they call in the development field, we call State Department kind of like the dark side. And then when I moved to USAID, it's kind of moving to the light side. And I've been in USAID since 2008. Very interesting and rewarding experience. I started working in USAID in an office that actually was a little bit outside of the mainstream. I worked in the Office of Civilian Military Cooperation, in which we were basically working in terms of creating that connection between, the 3Ds, development, defense, and diplomacy. And it was a very interesting work. And after that, I was able to spend, do 5 years, a tour of 5 years, 2 in Afghanistan, when I was in the Western Afghanistan in the province of Herat, incredible experience. And then 3 in Peru, and now I'm back here working for the Latin American Caribbean region. And I'm a program analyst, and I'm working in the South America regional office. We have an office here that deals with South America, and I had the opportunity of working with incredible professionals like Lorin Kavanaugh, who's also linking to this call, for example, work in very exciting initiatives like the Venezuela Juntos es Mejor Challenge. I'm also do coverage in terms of all the non-presence countries in which we have activities or we have interests, but we don't have a mission. For example, in Bolivia, we have Chile, we have places like Uruguay, which basically we just always listening to them. And so it's a very interesting opportunity. And I'm sorry that I gave you all this big lump of things but I think that it pretty much describes my experience of coming from Miami, being FIU, taking that experience, coming to DC, building up on that, on both the professional and the personal relationships here, and made a life here. And I'm this has happened from 1997 to here. You know, it's what it's 13 years. You know, here in the in USAID.
Wonderful. And you made reference, and I want to introduce, and I know she's on the line, but she'd like to give any quick intro. Lorin Kavanaugh-Uklu, that has become one of FIU's strongest partners at USAID. Lorin, are you on the line? Love to have you say a few words as far as your own role. And actually, why don't I use you to also go a little bit more abstract with yourself and David and Kirill, your own role, but also let's dial this back a little. In the most abstract of ways, how do you each individually define and see international development? Lorin.
Okay. So I'm Lorin Kavanaugh-Uklu. I'm in the USAID's Center for Development Innovations within the U.S. Global Development Lab. Essentially, we are the innovation hub for the entire agency. And what that means is we essentially try out new practices, innovative approaches to identify what works. And then the goal of that is to test it and then make it market ready, essentially ready for the rest of the agency to uptake. So that encompasses digital technology innovation, that encompasses public-private partnership innovation, so how we work with private sector partners. That encompasses innovation in the sense of how we design our programs so that they're more efficient and effective and achieve more results, as well as how we bring in new solutions to address some of our most critical problems around the world, not just relying on old approaches, but trying to bring in new actors, new partners, build local capacity, and new solutions that really can help change the game of development so that we're a 21st century agency reflecting the needs of communities where they are right now. And that also includes, at the lab, we also cover science technology research elements. So we do work with scientists around the world to help build their capacity and their ability to contribute new innovation for development. So the lab has existed for about 5 years. We are going to be rolling up into a new bureau soon as part of the agency transformation process. But in the lab, I lead a team around open innovation competitions. And competitions are essentially, one of those ways we source in those new ideas, test them, and then scale them up. So we basically either put out prize calls or challenge calls and invite solvers to respond to them. We fund those ideas and we work with those organizations to really scale up their activities. I've been at the agency for a really long time, so if any of these terms don't make sense, I apologize. Feel free to interrupt at any time and ask questions if something doesn't make sense. But turning to Carlos's question, Carlos, do you mind saying it once again?
Yeah, and let's not overthink it for all three of you, but each one of you have some storied careers already and have worked on many, many projects. In the abstract term, how do you personally see international development? And what is, how do you wake up every morning and, I know I've gotten to know all three of you. How do you define it?
That's interesting. For me, what it means is putting an end to extreme poverty being living on less than $2 a day. There are, I can't remember the figure at this point, but it's probably 8 billion or 6 billion people around the world still live on very little money each day. They don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to the education that you and I might have access to. They don't have access to basic services provided by their government or the economic opportunities. So from my perspective, international development is trying to reduce this gap in poverty and alleviate conditions and ensure that people have opportunity wherever they might live in the world. Okay. And this aligns with our foreign policy goals as a nation. So everything we do is helping to support our strategy around the world.
Kirill, thoughts on the question?
I have to agree with Lorin on everything she said. From my perspective, it is a two-way street. It is us using the resources and benefits that we have as a wealthy nation to be able to assist other countries around the world and other people around the world to raise their standard of living, to improve their education, their healthcare, their ability to succeed on their own. But then it's also the reverse as well. It's making sure that when we do this, we are making friends around the world. We are creating relationships and building linkages between our people and the people of other countries, so that when conflict happens, when issues arise, we are in a kind of a relationship that allows our countries to be able to speak civilly and resolve those differences, because we've already, for lack of a better term, made friends, rather than engaging in more violent or military conflict. And so it is a two-way street. It's us helping, but it's also us seeing the benefits of that help.
Wonderful. And David?
You're muted.
David?
Okay, yeah. So I completely agree with my colleagues, and they have provided an excellent description. In terms of what's the meaning of international development. For me, I want to go a little bit more abstract, and I want to go back to a human condition. We do have needs, and we do share that same human condition. And when I think about international development, and when I wake up, every morning, is the fact that I'm doing work in order to address issues with health, issues with inequality of access of resources, issues that my fellow human being, my fellow human beings in communities who are thousands of miles away are dealing with issues that are in some cases, robbing of health, robbing of human dignity, issues, for example, with violence. So there is a whole universe of needs, and I think that we are in a position, and thankfully so, we're in a position to provide assistance in order to address those basic needs that keep us from reaching or maximum potential. And I know that I'm getting a little bit too hippish in this sense, but that actually is what I feel, and that's what it gets me in the morning, and when I'm doing my work, when I'm working with folks, like the folks that are here with me, joining me in this webinar. That's what drives me, and that is something that is right there, the driving engine that keeps you moving. And of course, understanding, of course, that in case like the international development, looking from the perspective of USAID, we are an arm of the U.S. foreign policy, and also we do the work that we do helps with the U.S. national interest, and in terms of creating partnerships, building with people. In fact, when you start building stability in countries, in Latin America, let's just take Latin America. For interest, having a prosperous, stable Latin America is what we want, because again, that fits perfectly with U.S. national interest, and that's looking at the complexity of the issue from both sides, from more abstract, about the human condition, about what can you do, and then you also understand that you're part of this U.S. foreign policy, and then you have the objectives, how those objectives basically fulfill your needs. So I may have gone a little bit too overboard on that, but that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, David, for helping us frame. Eric, I'm going to now cite David every time. We want to make sure to cover all of the bases on all of our global fly-ins: development, defense, and diplomacy. And just so our three guests know, we've got all of those bases covered in this last 3 days. Tomorrow, the group will be meeting with more defense-oriented folks. This morning, we had two great alumni that were diplomats, and we're speaking to you all today on international development. This group of 40-ish, either students or recent grads, are at the start of their careers. I want to go onto the cliche question, but knowing that the world has evolved since your careers started, if you were to go back in time or to help advise these 40-some, key practical tips on what they may want to be doing now to break into the international development space. Who would like to take a first crack? Kirill?
I can talk from a contractor point of view. I think both Lorin and David might have more insight into how somebody would get into USAID itself as either a direct hire or a foreign service officer. But from a contractor's point of view, and I can go back very quickly and just sort of explain what contractors do.
Sure.
Contractors are the implementing partner of USAID. All those great ideas that Lorin and David come up with, they're usually implemented by some kind of a contractor, whether they are nonprofit or for-profit, whether it's through a contract or a grant or a cooperative agreement, which is very complicated to explain right now. But through a variety of different mechanisms. It is contractors that are more often than not, going out to the field, setting up independent offices and implementing the work that USAID wants to do. And there are literally hundreds of contractors, and you have, some of the largest, like groups like Kavanaugh-Uklu, who have literally billions of dollars worth of contracted work, down to very small nonprofits that may have one or two grants that they're implementing on a very specific basis. Finding a way into one of these contractors is like finding a way into any industry. You identify the groups that you're interested in working with. You figure out kind of what the subject matter is and the type of work that they do. And you proceed on going about making connections with them. The same thing is true today for what was true when I started my career 25 years ago. You network. You figure out who you want to talk to. Most of the time, you will find a willing person to talk to you and sit down and have a informational interview with you, or be referred to somebody. Use LinkedIn. I'm 25 years into my career. I still use LinkedIn practically every single day. Either I'm looking for an opportunity, or looking for somebody who wants an opportunity. Make contact with those folks. Try and get informational interviews. I would say beef up your own credentials to the extent that you can. Things that we look for, even at a basic level, for USAID contractors, we are looking for a second language. If you speak a second language, that's great. Spanish and French is always useful. Arabic, very useful to this day. Still Russian, which is how I got into the business, is still useful. Asian-based languages, whether that's Chinese or Thai or some other Asian languages, can be useful as well. So have a second language. If you have a third language or a fourth language, by all means, that's even better, but at least have a second language. I could not graduate with my master's degree in international relations without being able to pass a second language test. And so that is something that's critical in the field. International experience, whether voluntary or paid, is also very, very important. Even if it's a summer overseas, that will put you head above other folks who have not done that. So some sort of a volunteer opportunity, whether it's through a nonprofit organization or a school-based group or a religious-based organization, or even a direct internship with an implementer some way, having that 3 or 4 months overseas at a minimum, if you can do a year, that's better, will give you that head above everybody else. And then try and find relevant internships if you can. A lot of internships in DC, especially in our field, are actually paid. They're not paid well, but they're paid. Try and find what you can to be able to get at least 6 months of experience under your belt. And then after that, network. Before that, during that, and after that, network. Make connections. Look who, look at the people who you work with and who you know. Ask them to connect you to somebody else. Most of the time, they'd be happy to do that, and build it that way. You can find a list of USAID contractors on the USAID website. They usually have Excel spreadsheets of every contractor on there. You can just go into Google and type USAID and contractor, or USAID and rule of law development, or USAID and small business development, whatever it might be that you're interested in, and you will see search results for dozens of organizations that do this kind of work. And make contact with those folks and get out there. The strategies in many ways are kind of the same. It's just you have a lot of digital tools at your disposal now to be able to access it quicker.
Okay, David, practical tips, considering the world has changed, but these 40-some souls are about to help you solve your mission.
Definitely, no, I agree. I agree 100% with what I said right now. And I think in terms of my experience, and what I recommend is to definitely do whatever you have to do to be unique. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is that look for the experiences that will give you that edge, or for example, do the internships. Definitely, you have to. If you're going to be in international development field, international affairs field, move to a place where you can go ahead and gives you the opportunity to grow professionally through internships. Don't worry about right now about whether the internship is paid or not paid. No, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the experience, a unique opportunity to have. To be able to say, I work on this, or I work in this region, or work on these issues. And that as time goes by, that builds up. And it's not just a matter of building your resume, but also building the connections with the people you're going to be working with. For example, USAID is a city that it's very transient. When I say transient, means that you have people from all over the world who are here serving for a number of years. They're moving out. And when you start building networks of contacts here and maintaining those network contacts, actually, as time goes by, it becomes global. You're able to, maybe this year you're doing an internship with somebody, or you're working with somebody, you're intern for somebody who in the next 3 or 4 years is going to be in Africa, is going to be in Europe, working for such organization. So definitely look for those opportunities, and do not worry about whether the internship is paid or the opportunity is paid. No, go look for opportunities that are going to build your knowledge base, and then it's going to make you unique to travel. I completely agree with it. Go. There's so many opportunities to go out and be able to either volunteer. And I know sometimes under the current environment it's hard. And I know you're talking about right now the current environment, but things are more expensive. Costs are basically, you're starting your career and you're thinking about, how can I start getting into a career in which I haven't even started making money, but I'm already, doing things that are going to cost. But you have to look at the long term. You have to look at the long term, and what you're doing right now is building the set of capacity, skills, and knowledge that is going to make you different than the next person, and who's going to be, and that complex set or portfolio of skills we're going to get you to the next job, to the next opportunity. Again, it's a growing process, and it continues. You know, I mean, we're here, you know, and I can speak for the other colleagues here, you know, with 17 years in the career, you know, what I mean, but we're still, you know, we're still growing, we're still looking at opportunities, networking, talking to people, and the other advice, that I have is be flexible, be open to new directions. You know, I mean, if this is an advice actually that my father gave me that I helped here a lot, is that if you go to a jungle and think, okay, I'm going to go to a jungle just to kill a lion, and I'm sorry, it sounds very, but just to kill the lion. But then in the jungle, if you go with that mentality, you may be missing the giraffe, you may be missing the rhino, you may be missing the gazelle, meaning that be open at this stage in your career when you're beginning. It's that be open to be surprised and to have your interests and your experience take you in different directions. Don't be too constrained with what you think you want, you know, because again, it's a changing world, especially now. It's such a changing world when you have connections all over the world, where in 1 second you can be zooming with somebody in across the ocean. Be open to be surprised and be flexible.
Okay.
And
thank you. Lorin, from a skills perspective, and you have an interesting perch because you're also spanning the boundaries with, you know, innovators and, you know, folks at universities that are doing amazing work, and you're trying to innovate the larger beast, if you will. But if you're guiding these individuals here today, any skills or, you know, practical experiences that you would advise them to quickly start being focused on?
I think that what I'm always looking for when I'm hiring is someone who's customer focused, the way we're moving as an agency, and if you excuse the background noise.
That's okay.
Anything that where you're going as an agency, we have to ensure that we're very flexible, adaptable, make sure that you're up on the top trends of what's going on in development, make sure you have a very open mindset. I went through a training at USAID, and they told me aid stands for always it depends. Everything is super flexible at the agency. So you have to make sure that you are able to flex, go in new directions, focus on new efforts. You never know what the next disaster is going to look like. We didn't predict the pandemic, and that it would be a global pandemic, and we require all of us to focus on global health in a way that not all of us were well prepared to do. So you just have to be ready to have a very open mindset, especially when you are looking to work across cultures. So I think David and Kirill had very good comments about what you should do to make those connections. And I would just say, work on being flexible, adaptable, willing to jump in on anything, and you will be successful.
Good. So I'm going to ask the group if you have any questions, because we're at the 20-minute mark. Please add them to the chat or raise your hand. I think we do. And before I call on one of these, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, in addition to contractors, all three of these individuals know that universities are also in the mix, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I wouldn't let you all know that FIU, since its inception, since the 70s, has a strong record of working with USAID. Some of those highlights focus on a lot of disaster-related research, and I guess what is now formerly, I don't know if it's been rebranded yet, but what was the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, and a lot of our disaster-related researchers, helping secondary cities and understand policies to build resilient communities, water sustainability programs, yes, in Latin America, but even in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of justice reform programs that the university has led, and more recently, even our computer science faculty working with USAID and NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, to help the Caribbean Basin countries better adapt their systems for storm surge tracking and a lot of other storm related stuff. So even FIU is a contractor and a major contractor of sorts with USAID. Jacob, you have your hand raised. Jacob
Yes, hi, my name is Jacob. Thank you so much again for taking the time to be with us today. I know that each of you briefly touched on the fact that your position can be affected and supports American foreign policy, even though you're working so closely with other nations. And so I was hoping that you could touch on a bit of maybe how your role or maybe some of your goals in international development and aid have been affected by maybe shifting foreign policy between presidential administrations or different time periods, since you've had a career that spans over so many years.
That's a good question. And Sebastian also just asked a question to that degree. So Kirill, Lorin, or David?
Yeah. So yeah, when I first interned with USAID, I believe back up. Wow, it's been that long. Bill Clinton was president, and then we obviously had George W. Bush, Barack. So over 4 administrations. Obviously, there is differences when you have different administrations coming in. The foreign policy changes to some degree. The administrator obviously changes all the time, and a lot of the senior membership changes, and their ideas for what the agency should look like, how it should be structured, that does change as well. And there are specific issues that come up. So, the one thing that's the biggest thing that jumps out at my head that has changed now 4 times over the course of the administrations is whether or not we provide in our healthcare programs, whether or not we provide education and access to family planning. So under President Clinton, we did. Under George Bush, we didn't. Under Barack Obama, we did. And now again, under Donald Trump, we don't. So that goes back and forth. And that actually has significant impact on our ability to implement, because our contracts don't end when the presidential administration changes. Our contracts continue. And if you have a program, a global health program that does maternal child health care or family planning or something along those lines, and your contract scope of work requires you to do X kind of work, and then the policy changes, you have to change, and that costs money, that costs time, and that affects the people who you are working with and trying to help dramatically. Same thing goes for HIV/AIDS work, also in the global health space. When we were under President Obama, I was working for a company that had a very robust climate change program in various parts of the world, and I know that others did as well. When that administration changed, those programs got curtailed to some degree and changed. So yes, absolutely, our foreign policy and who is the president of the United States and who controls Congress has a huge impact on the work that we do.
Okay. Let's see.
For the sake of time, yeah. But are you guys going to move to that question?
Go right ahead. No, chime in.
No, because I know time is a premium here. But yeah, I completely, I will say the same thing. We have to remember USAID is part of the U.S. foreign policy, the U.S. foreign policy apparatus, and also our work advances U.S. national security objectives. And the flavor, sometimes the administrations do change, and right now, we had really good examples mentioned, specifically with global health and that. But also you do have a core in terms of what you do, in terms of the humanitarian assistance, you work in education. So there might be a change in the flavor, and USAID as a federal agency, and to the credit of the people who work there also, we're able to be flexible and to adapt. Because every administration, by their own nature, they will bring their own priorities, their own perspectives, their own contexts. And in USAID, where you do have a center in terms of a core, in terms of what it does, what we do, there's a change sometimes in the flavor, and that's when we have to adapt and see how do we still accomplish the goals and objectives that we have. In example, in the contract, we have to do A, B, and C, while at the same time responding to the foreign policy and national security objectives. So it is a very interesting dance, let's say that.
Okay, and David, actually to segue and also merge a couple of these questions, I think this might be a good segue for you to touch on the Juntos es Mejor challenge that I know you and Lorin have been helping lead. Do you want to give a snapshot of what that is? You're muted, David. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. So this is a clear example of the agency looking for innovation. For thinking outside of the box. You do have a complex problem. You do have a massive influx of Venezuela who are driven out of the country because of circumstances. You don't have over, I think, 4.8 million people that are fleeing the country in Venezuela, and they're going to Colombia, they're going to Ecuador, they're going to Peru, countries that under this influx of individuals or of people, their systems, the social services systems are pretty much strained. So this is an example of the initiative that USAID is leading in coordination and collaboration with the IDB in terms of that we're looking for innovative solutions to improve the lives of Venezuelan migrants and the host communities that host them. These are basically the communities in Ecuador, in the communities in the border towns of Colombia, and in the central Colombia, because you do have a flow of Venezuelan immigrants that either, they're not just located in the border, but also go to economic centers across the country, and they also go to, for example, to Ecuador. So you have corridors of flow. And it's just about looking for innovative solutions. We're looking at focus areas on people, focus areas on productivity, on the livelihoods. There are issues. You have sets of issues, problems, challenges that need to be met. You do have needs dealing, for example, with the access to services. You do have large populations of internally displaced individuals and also Venezuelan migrants in Colombia, let's say right now, in which don't have access to health services, or don't have access to psychosocial services, that are dealing with trauma. You have gender-based violence. So you do have a whole set of needs that are there. And USAID, working again in coordination and collaboration with the IDB, are working on looking for solutions. And the way that we're doing that is that we're asking institutions, we're looking at partnerships in order to go ahead and we're basically crowdsourcing the process of looking for innovative out-of-the-box solution. And I know, Lorin, feel free to jump in because I know that I'm killing it. Lorin is the brain, the person who has been leading this effort, which has not been an easy challenge because, again, you have dealing with two organizations, the IDB, you're dealing with USAID that have the own bureaucratic processes, momentum, and also you're dealing with a very complex issue, which is basically the Venezuelan humanitarian crisis. And Lorin, I don't know if you want to jump in.
No, I think you did a great job, David. I would just suggest that folks check out, if we can send around the presentation afterwards, then you have access to the website. It's juntosesmejorve.org. And we are open now for solutions. We actually launched at FIU in October. So we are very excited that I know there are student groups that have been working on solutions to submit for potential funding. And there are many different tiers that we're looking at in terms of innovation at the early stage. It's a $25,000 level for ideas, all the way up to $1.5 million for ideas that have been well established, have a lot of evidence and data behind them, and are ready to scale. So please do check out the website. Please do share the information about the challenge with your own communities and networks, because we want to make sure that we get the best ideas in before the end of the year, before the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th.
Yeah. And you're now, Lorin, you're now in the, is it a second wave of reviewing actual concepts and applications? Give us a quick status check.
Oh, wow. You probably were asked to judge, weren't you?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm not a judge.
We are reviewing constantly. So we are constantly looking at what's coming in and pushing it out to our reviewers. We have a very rigorous process for review where we do first an initial validation on whether an application is eligible. Then we do a first technical review with reviewers from IDB and USAID. And then we do a second technical review after a full application is submitted. So it's quite a rigorous process. We want to make sure that we're investing in the right things that really will push the needle. And we are about to make some announcements around awards. So those are coming soon. There has been some news over the weekend that may have sidelined any announcements we might want to make in the near future, at least this week. But it's constant. Applications are being evaluated till September. So applications that come in before that end of fiscal year deadline will be considered.
Okay. And by the looks of some of the participants, even in this group, we have Jennifer Puentes from who's actually dialing in from Colombia. You have Jose Ignacio, Peruvian national, and you have A. Contreras, that are all giving USAID props for helping launch this initiative, considering they have themselves experienced the impact of the huge influx of migrants and complexities.
And if I may jump in, in terms of the solutions, we're looking for solutions that for activities and we're looking for solutions that could be implemented and we have a specific set of countries. We have Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Panama, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, and Venezuela when the conditions allow. And so these are the countries in which we're looking for innovative solutions.
Wonderful. Jennifer, you're joining us from Colombia. Welcome from Colombia. You had a question.
I'm sorry. Yes. My name is Jennifer Puentes. I am an FIU student. I just stay here during the pandemic with my family. So, and they had a question going back to the definition of development. And I see how this definition, the American sense, works in certain areas. But how do you work with ethnic groups such as indigenous who have a different definition of development, but are also more vulnerable to violence and injustice, at least in the case of Latin America?
Anyone want to take a crack at that? David, Kirill?
I can jump in right now. Actually, your timing is impeccable because a couple of weeks ago, maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, USAID kind of published its policy for indigenous populations, and it basically outlines how we outlines how we're supposed to be working with them, and by that I mean how we need to ensure that they are integrated into the descriptions of the problems, into the design of activities, to make them an integral part in the whole process that takes place from conception of an assistance or an assistance or development activity down to the implementation. So there's something that USAID here has been thinking, and there is a policy, and I think that I can, while somebody else is speaking, I can go ahead and try to see if I can get the link to it, because there is a newly minted, USAID strategic framework in terms of working with indigenous groups.
Okay. Kirill, from any of your own projects previously, anyone relate to the question of Jennifer's question?
Yeah, not necessarily specifically from the projects that I've worked on, but from a general point of view, obviously the whole of USAID's work stems from our own foreign policy objectives and our own goals. But the programs themselves, like David said, have to generate at the local level. And so what you have is USAID folks in missions all over the world that work with local stakeholders, local partners to determine what exactly is needed. And I can tell a little anecdote. When I first got started in the business, I was told this story about a USAID project had many years earlier, probably in the early 80s, in a Francophone African country, where it was determined that this particular indigenous village needed a well. They needed this water well to be built. And so USAID had gone in and paid some contractor to dig a well and make it look really nice and useful. And then when they came back, they realized that it had been overgrown and nobody had used the well. And in fact, when they had talked to the villagers, they realized that there was a nickname for this well. I don't remember what it was, but it was something in French that derogatorily meant the white man's water. And what was implied there is nobody asked the village whether or not they wanted the well. They just determined they needed a well, because why wouldn't you need a well? USAID has come a very long way from that point, where we have realized that we have to work with indigenous populations, with local people, to determine what their needs are, or else we as US taxpayers are simply wasting our money building things that'll never get used or doing things that'll never get implemented. So from a very general point of view, it is very much determined on a country by country, region by region, country by country, and then down to the local level basis to make sure that what we are doing is going to be used. It's what is wanted, and that it is specifically designed to help the folks in that area. What might work, and this is something that Lorin is probably doing on a daily basis, what might work in the most populated city in Indonesia will never work in a local village in West Africa. We have to be even if the problem that we're trying to fix is the same, we have to tailor the solutions to make sure that they are culturally appropriate, that they are regionally appropriate, and they are appropriate in every climate and language and every other way.
Okay. And I know David has added the link on the project he was referring to. Lorin, any additional words on this? I know I want to get to the next question too.
Yeah, no, we should get to the other questions, but just to note that is what we're doing in the lab and what there's been a sea change really in the way we develop programs at the agency, and being more integrating voices of the groups that we want to elevate and also support into the design process. So it's no longer an issue of us determining what's needed, but instead working with local communities to better understand how we can be effective and support them and ensure that the solutions are right fit and customized to their needs.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to add this to the group chat. One of FIU's previous projects, and Jennifer, this goes back to home, I guess, for you, were these Casas de Justicia, funded by USAID. I've given you the link there, and from what I know is helping more rural communities, and even in virtual ways, funny but true, understand judicial processes, and I think it was more focused on the Afro-Colombian communities in the rural areas. So you may want to take a look at that link to see. That program has since been, it's ended, but that'll give you some perspective of FIU's own work. Let's see, we had a question from Clarissa Buasi.
Hi, thank you for giving me a chance to share my question. So I'm a third-year student here at FIU. I'm a psychology and international relations major. I'm interested in US foreign policy and less developed countries. So my question was actually for Mr. Resnick. I understand USAID, they help less developed countries they're helping less developed countries face this pandemic. So I know a lot of other countries aren't able to accommodate the virus the way that countries like the US and Europe can. So I just wanted to know how the US aid was helping, and whether that shift in priority was placing like kind of a burden on the USAID's resources, maybe for other things that they were focused on before the pandemic hit, considering it's so sudden.
Yeah, at this point, I wish my project counterpart on the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance project was here instead of me for that question. I work with the Office of Food for Peace, which is like the sister office to OFDA. I don't believe that it's putting a strain on USAID resources. I do believe that we have temporarily shifted in many ways. So our emergency disaster response unit or mission stays the same. We just are responding to this particular emergency at this particular time. And the USAID emergency response function is set up to be able to respond to emergencies that we didn't know about the day before. And I will say that I get an email with a daily dashboard tracker. It has the globe of the world on it, and it has little, bubbles for different parts of the world of where something might have occurred that we didn't know about the day before, whether it's a hurricane or an earthquake or a civil war broke out or an emergency pandemic. When Ebola started spreading through West Africa, it was USAID that responded to that emergency. When an earthquake shakes Turkey, it's USAID, or that region, it's USAID that responds to that emergency. So we're designed, at least in my part of USAID, to immediately pivot and shift to respond to what needs to be responded today. In the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, we also have a whole other Bureau of Global Health whose sole purpose is to respond to global health needs around the world. Now, in many cases, the work that they do is long-term for sustainable global health, improving maternal child health, improving responses to HIV/AIDS or other communicable diseases, improving sanitation and hygiene. Those are long-term responses, but they also shift to make sure that the right supplies go out. The single largest contract that USAID has ever given out, and it is in the billions of dollars, it is a global supply chain project for health needs. So that would be everything from medicine to supplies like injectables and masks and tents, etc., to vaccines, to other supplies that you may need. So, and it is literally the largest single thing that USAID does, is a global health response. And that goes all over the world to every part of the country. In fact, the company that's currently implementing it, Chemonics, their contract is up, I believe, next year, and pretty much every major contractor that works for USAID is gunning for that contract because it's so large, and because the work is so important and so global in nature. So we are responding, and I don't think that it has necessarily taken our eye off of everything else. From a money point of view, from an emergency point of view, obviously things, priorities do need to shift as they are needed, and hopefully we're able to go back and reprioritize once this settles down.
Clarissa and our guests, we're all aware, tomorrow the group's going to be meeting with Steve Olive of the Western Hemisphere Bureau, and that session is focused on COVID and the pandemic. So we'll be curious.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Thanks for your answer.
But David and Lorin, any additional thoughts on the COVID question as far as how things have impacted your own work and priorities, if anything?
In terms of not much, again, because again, you do have two tracks. You have the track in which you do humanitarian assistance, disaster response, and then you also have the track where you have development work. And yeah, of course, you do have pandemics like this one, crisis like this one, which move resources there. but you also have your core of activities, and activities that hopefully at this time, are giving fruit. And by this I mean, for example, we have spent a lot of money in Latin America, a lot of energy, a lot of resources in terms of building the public health systems, so that they're better able to deal with situations like this. Not a crisis with this magnitude, but again, systems that are more agile, who are more responsive, who are able to have better testing, better services, better access to medicines, making sure that vulnerable groups in the communities that we are working on have access to those services. So there's a whole plethora of work that we have done, that is part of the core set of services that we provide, or work that we do, that we see, and we actually, I'm not going to even say that we hope that it's bearing fruit. We do see that work right now as countries are working to deal with this incredible crisis, with this massive crisis. We do see where our work in terms of building those capacities are paying off, how the better position in the measure possible that they can be able to deal with the circumstances that is taking place. So yep.
Purina, you had a question? I think it kind of relates to what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you so much, Carlos. And thank you to our guests for speaking with us today. This is a topic that's very close to many of our hearts. And excuse my background noise, I'm in the living room with my parents. So my question has to do with how USAID and its contractors are responding to information and communication technology challenges in light of the pandemic and the transition to remote learning and work. I know a lot of countries in the area, in the region, have invested heavily in ICT in the last few years. So if you could just speak to what that looks like in light of the pandemic.
Good question. Thoughts there? David, Kirill, Lorin?
In light of the pandemic, I mean, a lot of it is being put into place, but USAID has actually been way ahead on this issue for a number of years, actually. It all began, it's all part of what we call MEL or MEAL. It's the area of or MERL. It's an area of subject matter where it started out as monitoring and evaluation, being able to monitor the programs that you're doing, provide an assessment for what you need to do, provide ongoing monitoring, and then evaluate whether the programs that you implemented were actually meeting the goals that you set out to meet. And then it started to evolve from monitoring and evaluation to monitoring and evaluation and learning. And now sort of for the last, I would say probably for the last 5 to 6 years, that learning piece has really started to grow. And that learning piece doesn't just mean learning from the projects, but it also starts to mean distance learning and using the tools at hand to be able to train others in other parts of the world. We are a U.S. government agent, or I'm a contractor, but we are a U.S. government agency that has thousands of people spread out across the globe. These are folks that need to be trained on a variety of different systems, on a variety of different procedures. Policies change all the time. Things change all the time, and we have to be able to train them. I have my contract that I implement has an entire training unit that works with my client, the Office of Food for Peace, to provide ongoing training on a variety of different topics. And they're constantly creating new training. And when we shut down, when I say shut down, we're still working, but when the offices physically shut down and everyone went to telework, it was almost as if nothing changed for us, because we immediately blinked into utilizing existing platforms, utilizing existing ways that we communicate with everybody, and we continue to work. And it's a little, it's a little lonely right now for us, but we continue to work, and we continue to do that globally, not just in the United States or within our own team. USAID has really robustly turned the idea of teleworking from a very generic point of view to an operational function, to be able to learn from our projects, implement our projects, and continue to develop what we do better and better.
Okay. Lorin, David, additional thoughts, challenges? That is a good point, that because by the nature of the organization, you're already kind of virtual and spread out. It hasn't been that much of a hiccup, but other perspectives? Lorin?
I do think that a lot is going on right now around thinking about the digital side and what our digital response needs to be across the agency. We actually have a team within the lab that is looking at this. They've also recently issued a digital strategy, which I would highly recommend you take a look at, that is really intended to guide how all of our programming around the world essentially is implemented, and how we address digital and technology issues, thinking and keeping in mind privacy issues, keeping in mind connectivity issues, etc. So I'd really recommend you take a peek at that. I can't speak for my colleagues around how much investment's going into connectivity at this point in time around pandemics. I'm suspecting that Steve Olive, when he speaks tomorrow about the response, might be able to provide a little bit more detail. But do know this is definitely a priority. There are definitely smart minds thinking about it, and it's really good of you to keep that in mind. It is something we all have to do better on, especially if this comes back in the fall and we all are teleworking again. That's going to impact our beneficiaries even more so.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Carlos, I want to take a second bite of the apple on this, because I just remembered something that I wanted to add.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that we work with populations that are poor in nature around the world, that are third world, one of the things that we often lack in those parts of the world is infrastructure. And especially its utility infrastructure, whether it's electricity or water, but it's also internet. The vast majority of the people who are the beneficiaries of our programs don't have access to hardwired internet, but they do have their cell phones. And probably for well over a decade, we have been working on programs that directly connects with folks through their cell phones, because in many ways, that's the only way they can connect to the rest of the world. And that includes health programs, that includes voting and democracy and election programs, that includes small business. A lot of folks are starting to run their businesses on their phones, because you can utilize the phone and adapt it to a payment mechanism faster than you can string hardwire internet or cable throughout the country. So we've been doing it forever at this point, and just switching, because everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody has a computer or a television even.
Okay, good point. Well, we're gonna be ending this soon, because I think we've gone a little bit over our hour, but I want to give, on behalf of everyone and Eric, I want to give all three of our panelists a wonderful thanks, because I think from each of your vantage points, and each in your own ways involved with FIU, so we think you have given the group a lot to think of. And let's see if we can follow Melitza's lead. If you have found the applause feature, please let's give them a round of applause. I do want to give a special shout out to Kirill. You've heard a lot about our amazing alumni network, and his Secret Service code name in our group is close to George Washington, because Kirill, you did found our alumni network, correct?
I did. I came to DC in '96, and I remember calling the head of alumni affairs at FIU, and I said, "Hey, where's the alumni club? I want to get involved." And he said, "There is no alumni club." So I got a list from him and started the alumni club, and we were the first chartered, if you will, FIU alumni club outside of Florida.
Yeah, there you go. And it is that foundation, because it was that those initial interactions and connectivity that really, I think, allowed the network to grow, because it became a big thing, but also I think even from my predecessor's perspective, got the university to realize, there was something special here. Another fun fact of Kirill, and I hate to put, is Kirill, and I've just given the group a nice little link, is the first, cool. David, Lorin, any final thoughts from your end for this group? We thank you for your time. Lorin?
No, I think this is a fantastic conversation. Always excited to connect with FIU students and to share what we're doing around the challenge, which is open to COVID solutions, by the way, since you are going to be talking to Steve Olive tomorrow. Want to make sure that's very clear. But thank you for the opportunity, Carlos. And I'm able to share information around the lab or around the challenge. I'm happy to do so. So great to connect with you.
Look at that. Folks, you've met another lab here in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
the development lab. David, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity talking to you, and you're at a point in your careers, it's incredibly beautiful. You're right now, I know it's very stressful, you basically are in this road that is just starting, but it's so full of possibilities, So I'm in some way estoy como envidioso, like envious, the opportunities you guys gonna have, and good luck, and we're here, one of the things about the city also is that it's so full of professionals who are generous with their time and who, so reach out to people, and talk to them, and I think that you guys in the FIU Lab Association have done a great job and continue doing things like this, I think that there's incredible value in that. So thank you so much.
And back to the leader of our own lab, L Talent Lab in Washington, D.C., FIU. Eric, any closing words or?
My own thanks to all of the panelists as well, and to you, Carlos, for leading that discussion and housekeeping for the group. We have the morning off tomorrow in honor of all from our group who are graduating and doing virtual commencement. So congratulations to all of those who are graduating. And in that time, I'll send a couple updates on the specific panelists participating in tomorrow's sessions, because we will have updates on that. And I'll get working on our sessions for next week that you all seem very excited about.
All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great afternoon, great evening. Thank you, Kirill.
everybody.
David.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye, gang.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.